Well, thank you for the great introduction, and I'm really honored to be here as well. I hate filling out forms. I don't like boxes. I'm a native of the islands of Fiji, but I'm not really a native Pacific Islander. I'm ethnically South Asian, but I have never really been to Asia. I'm female-bodied, but I'm not female. My grandparents, parents, my sibling, my niece are all legal residents or citizens of this country, but I'm neither a U.S. citizen or legal resident. I'm undocumented. I don't have any sort of legal status to live here, though I do have a legal right to work here. So I don't fit into any conventional boxes. And yet I'm supposed to be a moral minority in this country, make the best of opportunities given to me, strive for the American dream, conform to American society's norms about being quiet, apolitical, submissive, and successful. Due to my actual lived experiences, however, I have decided that we need to reframe what it means to be a moral minority in the US. So before I get into this and my story, I want to give some context. We talk about immigration policy quite a bit in this country, who to keep out, who to let in. But we don't talk about the elephant in the room, and that's race. We don't talk about race and racism. So our immigration policy is a regulation of race. The regulation of race based on how we let people in and how we don't let them in. And it's always been this way ever since we first colonized this country through the genocide of Native Americans, through bringing Africans here forcefully as chattel slaves, to 1790 Immigration Nationality Act that gave white men the right to be citizens only, to the Chinese Exclusion Acts of the 1800s that pretty much told the Asians not to come to this country, and to the many Supreme Court decisions that effectively limited citizenship to white men, and to the present way in which the quota system upholds and justifies an enforcement-only deportation regime, where it takes a son or daughter of a legal resident of Mexican nationality 115 years to immigrate to this country. That's an actual calculation of how long it will take if someone got in line, if they could get in line, that is, to begin with. So today, immigration is a way to uphold a certain racial order with the use of seemingly benign laws. I'll just give you one example of a benign law. Take, for example, Terry stops. Police can pull over anyone based on reasonable suspicion, and race can be part of the suspicion because racial profiling is legal in this country. And often cops may find people driving without a license. They can arrest that person, they can jail that person, and due to federal programs like secure communities, they can bring that person to custody of ICE and process them for deportation, for removal from this country, for removal from their home and their families. And over 1 million people get deported like this every year. And it all starts with one benign traffic stop. So this is the sort of racial context in which we are up against in this country. And that is a reality that I was confronted with when I was brought here at the age of 14. And my father dragged me kicking and screaming from the islands of Fiji to this so-called land of freedom and opportunity so that we could have a better future than our past. And of course, there are more complications than just this. It's that I'm queer, I'm genderqueer, and I'm undocumented. And so the odds are stacked against me, pretty much from the start. And there's no way I should be standing up here in front of you and actually have survived all those years, but I have. That's because I'm a moral minority. The shattered narrative of a moral minority in this country is someone who works hard, succeeds in school, at work, does not complain about any kind of oppression. It is an idea that is vested in white supremacy and white privilege that wants everyone to believe that racism and racial privilege is not the status quo. That it is the fault of those people who don't work hard because anyone can achieve what they want to achieve in this country. So it's a way for those with white privilege to say to other minorities that these Asian people can do it, so you have no excuse to not be able to do it. It is a narrative that is essentially fiction. So today I'll give you a counter-narrative of what it's like to be a moral minority, rooted in actual lived experience. And I was brought here and put in some random American high school in the Bay Area, California, back in 1999. There were kids who made fun of my accent, and even teachers who would speak to me in English, and I wouldn't be able to sort of speak back because we spoke English, but it was funny. There was this loss in translation that happened where my English was different from their English. And then they made fun of how I would dress as well. And we moved here. I lived in a tiny hotel room with my parents and my older sibling before we moved to a mobile home park where, again, I didn't really have space or room to myself. So I was expected to, though, still survive in these conditions and rise above and go to a prestigious college, become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. So I graduated high school in 2002. But I was undocumented because I didn't have any paperwork that would allow me to go to college in the US, let alone know where to go, what to do, and how to ask for help. And just like in every other story, there's a hero in the story, and it isn't me. It's my mother, who made sure I didn't sit at home. And she signed me up to go to community college classes. And she said that I had no excuse, go to class, because for her, she didn't have the resources to ever go to college and graduate from college, but she has made sure that I could do everything that she could not do. So I did my best, knowing her history and knowing my parents' history. I went to community college. I transferred to a state school. I even finished my graduate degree with her help. But at the age of 24, I had a crisis. And a crisis was what you call getting in line as an immigrant in this country. You see, as immigrants, we are told to always get in line, even though for the vast majority of people, there is no line. I was lucky, somewhat. Or I thought I was lucky, in the sense that my grandmother is a US citizen. So she sponsored my parents when I was about a teenager. But family sponsorship through a relative like your grandmother or your aunt or your uncle takes years and years and years to come through. So think of it this way. Think of it as being given a ticket to be in a line that goes all the way to a visa counter, but being in a really long line and taking years to get to the visa counter. And by the time you get there, by the time we got there, I was 24. So my parents, handed their ticket in. They got their green card, stamped, approved. I gave them my ticket in, and I was told, oops, you're 24, you're over 21, you're no longer part of your family, you can't get a green card, so pack your bags and leave this country all over again. That was the real moment of crisis for me, because here I was educated, and I was cleaning warehouses, industrial sites, office buildings for a living, and I couldn't drive. I had no form of identification besides a passport, and a passport that had a picture of me as a 12-year-old that didn't even look like me anymore. I couldn't leave the country, because leaving the country would have meant a 10-year ban from ever stepping back, ever seeing my family again. And people would keep telling me to go back to Mexico, and I can't even do that. And I was the only undocumented person in my family. So I couldn't really talk to anyone about how that was like for me. So my only option at the time seemed to be the Federal Dream Act. And again, it was my mother who told me about the Federal Dream Act, told me to Google it and go do something, go get it passed. I'm like, okay. And the Federal Dream Act is this really conservative Republican legislation, or it was 10 years ago, that allows some people who are educated here to basically get a pathway to citizenship. It is the least that America could do as a country. It made complete common sense to me. And it was like, why hasn't this passed in like 5 years? And now it's like 10 years. So it didn't make sense to me. Then I was like, how do you pass a bill? And so now, there's something I've realized over time is that if you build it, they will come. And there was no real national organization in 2007 or so when I started looking into this issue that would be about undocumented youth organizing for change and taking over offices and occupying buildings and shutting down streets. So, but we had online chat rooms and online forums at the time. So one day I decided to go online, and I found other undocumented people like me living in different states, and it was like an eye-opening thing, like, oh my God, there are undocumented people from Iran and Mexico and Canada, why? But we decided to sort of organize from the ground up and to build a movement. And the first thing was to use social media to connect with other undocumented people. And the second was to share our stories, because our stories are so powerful. So I'm talking about taking this risk of being undocumented and unafraid before it even became a slogan. And it got splashed all over the covers of magazines and stuff. People often ask me why I came out and declared my status. And my only answer is that I know from experience that living in a closet doesn't solve our problems. So when we built a listserv of over 100,000 undocumented youth in a space of a year, everyone wanted a piece of it, right? So I was pitched to countlessly by the multi-million-dollar nonprofit industrial complex, by funders, by lawyers, by academics. For a while, I tried to work within the system. But I'm queer, and I'm undocumented, and I'm a female-bodied person of color. I mean, how much could I work in the system? To get any funding or support, I was told over and over that I had to conform to the ideas and institutions in place. There's a way of doing things, and I had to follow those rules. And I was like, I can't follow rules, so I break the rule while I sleep. You know, I'm in this country without any lawful presence. I mean, I don't really have that sort of I have to follow the rules thing in my head. So I was told I can't talk about US imperialism and how it destroys countries and how people move because we go and occupy their spaces and cause violence in their countries. And you can't talk about and write about people who are not star athletes and valedictorians, that I couldn't build my own mobile action network to make text messages and take action that way. I was told I couldn't stop deportations, even though we did, and now everyone who said we couldn't do it gets money to do so. I was told that I can't have gay people as part of immigration reform, and I certainly couldn't have the DREAM Act as a standalone bill that goes first because the strategy is supposed to be comprehensive immigration reform, all or nothing. That's when I realized that I had to abide by the system, or that I was asked to abide by the system. And that's the only way I could sort of climb the ladder of success in the nonprofit industrial world. I'm asked to be the kind of moral minority that people are used to, the one who abides by the law, the one who fits in with the racist white superstructure, and the one who does not see their interests align with the interests of other black and brown people, and the one who does not talk back but submits to silence. I decided, since I was being honest about being queer and undocumented, I had to be consistent in my ideology. So every time I was told I could not do something, I made sure I did precisely that. So we held a festival disobedience action by undocumented youth in McCain's office in Arizona, even as our so-called allies screamed at us. We occupied political offices even as we were branded petulant and divisive. We infiltrated a detention center in Broward to demonstrate that the Obama administration was lying about only deporting violent criminals. And we called for Obama to end deportations of all undocumented youth as we occupied his offices in battleground states. So what is the real story? And what is it like to be a real moral minority? Well, there's 5 things I'll tell you. A moral minority is subversive. America puts us in little containers, so we have to take advantage of it. We have to build power in our communities, spend money in our own communities, spend resources in teaching our own how to tackle the structures of power and make people uncomfortable. A moral minority is loud. She or he is not silent. A moral minority is not afraid to be her authentic self. It is important to take the stigma out of whatever it is a society stigmatizes and own our spaces. A moral minority is honest, and that means calling things as they are. Name white supremacy when you see it, i.e., Israel-Palestine is about racism. Seeing Muslims with suspicion is a racist. Call out sexism when you see it. When your coworker is promoted over you, even though you are evenly or more qualified, that is sexism, call it out. Call it heterosexism. When your parents are all right with gay people, but not all right with their children being gay, that is heterosexism and homophobia, call it out. Those are just some examples. And the moral minority is also political. And being political doesn't mean voting and tracking legislation and lobbying and writing letters. Being political means making active decisions. Who you are dating is a political decision. You don't just start to date the person of the same race because it happens. It doesn't just happen. It is a political decision. And political change comes from using our lived experiences to foster a cultural transformation. A transformation of how American society views undocumented people, how it views queer people, and how it views an undocumented person of color right in front of you. So I'm ready to face the consequences of what it is to be my true authentic self in this country. I'll give everyone else here a choice. Choice between fantasy, which is embodied by American culture, commodification, simple binary oppositions of white and black and gay and straight, male and female, and legal and illegal, or an actual reality that is grounded in lived experiences of what a moral minority should look like. Somebody who is subversive, loud, authentic, honest, and political. To sum it up, just a badass. So which box will you choose? Will you choose fantasy, or will you choose reality?